What's going on, YouTube? This is BoxingWave. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. Also, like the video, hit that bell notification as well, and follow me on all social media platforms, Twitter, Instagram, at BoxingWave10. All right, let's talk about the welterweight division. All right, I want to follow up from the big wins last night or yesterday. Conor Ben picked up a big win, destroying Samuel Vargas in one round. Totally destroyed him. Wasn't expecting that. I've been following Conor Ben, but I haven't really been amazed by him. But he's improving very, very fast. Very impressive win. I knew he was going to beat Samuel Vargas. Just didn't think he would stop him so quickly. I'm thinking in the later half of the fight, 6th, 7th, 8th round maybe. He has been stopped before, so it wasn't no surprise that Ben stopped him. It was about when he stopped him. He literally went in there and kicked his ass. Very good performance. And we also had Jaron Boots Ennis, who beat Sergey Lipinets. All right, beat him in 6 rounds and literally destroyed him every round. I heard him several times in the fight, and he looked good. And at points, he was just toying with him. Okay. I was on live yesterday. I did cover both cards. Shout out to Joe Smith Jr. for picking up the win with Maxim Vlasov. Very good fight. I personally had it 7-5 for Vlasov. There was a few debatable rounds in there, in my opinion. I wasn't mad at the decision. I kind of figured they was going to give a really close fight to Joe Smith Jr. Joe definitely finished stronger, but I do think Vlasov won more rounds, all right? Made Joe look very uncomfortable in there. Joe really had to bang it out and grind it out. It wasn't an impressive performance, but it was a very entertaining fight, all right? Good fight. All right, but shout out to everyone that was here last night. We had a good time. It was a good live community yesterday, and we got to chop it up mainly about welterweights. We spoke on a lot of welterweight stuff. Also, I was able to join Punch Drunk Boxing. He was doing live last night, so pretty late. It was really, really late. I got to chop it up with him and his team and his people over there. Shout out to him. The way I see it, and I was able to go back and look at both performances by Conor Ben yesterday. I was able to look a little bit at Virgil Ortiz win against Maurice Hooker. I was able to look at Boots win over Lipinets last night again. And I wanted to really get a good eye and compare these guys. I also looked at a little bit of Rashidi Ellis's win recently as well. So, I was able to look at these guys because I want to really see where this division is going, because there was a lot of talk about how do we feel about a Jaron Ennis fighting a Bud Crawford or a Errol Spence, and there was a lot of chitter chat about Virgil Ortiz and Rashidi Ellis and all of these other guys that's on the come up. And one thing I do like all of these guys. They all look good. They all look like they have potential to become champions at some point. I'm a little disappointed with some of the welterweights and how we can't get some of the fights that we want to see. We can't get Spence and Bud. That's the fight that everyone pretty much wants. I'm glad that Pacquiao is still around. He did beat Keith Thurman 2 years ago. He did beat Adrian Broner that same year. And I like that. I love that. But I don't want to keep relying on Manny Pacquiao. And I feel like these fighters are still relying on Manny Pacquiao, trying to see what Pacquiao's going to do, trying to see if they can get their opportunities with him. A Pacquiao fight with anyone is still a good fight. Even though he's older, it's still a good matchup because I think Pacquiao is always going to give these guys a good fight. I did say this last night, no matter what age he is, at this point, he's still very, very fast. He still is very athletic. He is one of the most athletic fighters we've ever seen, and I think that's part of the reason why he can still fight at a high level. But I'm kind of tired of people relying on him. You know, people like him and Floyd before, you know, when he was on his way out. I'm kind of tired of it, you know. I wish these younger guys were facing each other. You know, and I'm talking about all of them. You know, I'm not solely blaming anyone here. I'm just being an honest boxing fan. I want to see the best fighters at welterweight really face each other. You know, a lot of them are facing each other, specifically the PBC fighters. They've done a pretty solid job of keeping things going in house. We did get a lot of fights between the PBC fighters. You know, Keith Thurman did fight Danny Garcia. He did fight Sean Porter. You know, he did fight Manny Pacquiao. You know, Spence did fight Danny and Sean. He fought Kell Brook. You know, so we're getting a lot of fights there. Bud, on the other hand, who's not a PBC guy, he did fight undefeated Kavalaskis, who did knock out David Alanesian, who recently knocked out Josh Kelly, you know, which was a big win. Pretty big upset. I didn't think Josh Kelly would lose that fight, even though he didn't look that impressive in the fights leading up to that. I thought that was a really big win. You know, so Bud did have the Benavides win. He did beat Jeff Horn after Jeff Horn picked up that win over Pacquiao. You know, he did beat Kell Brook recently, who is a fading Kell Brook, but it was still a good win, a good name to have under his belt at welterweight. But I'm still overall a little disappointed. We never got to see Khan against Brook when they were in their primes. We didn't get to see Brook fight Spence when Spence was his mandatory, when Brook was undefeated and should have been defending his title at welterweight before going up to fight Triple G. There's a lot of fights, you know, we didn't really get. Keith Thurman having his injuries. You know, Sean Porter is one of the few guys that I felt like was always very consistent, fighting top guys. Win or lose, he always fought top guys consistently whenever, you know, they were available. Even fighting a Ugas, very, you know, dangerous fight. Didn't have a big name. And speaking on Ugas, I want to speak about him. And I want to really make a point when it comes to guys like an Ugas. There's a lot of fighters that are always going to be brought up that has names and people are just familiar with them. All right, but that doesn't mean they are technically like the better fighter. Okay, there's a lot of guys that's been in there, like Samuel Vargas. We're all familiar with him. Why? Because he's been in there with Spence. He's been in there with Danny Garcia. You know, he's been in there with Amir Khan. Even dropped him. He's been in there with Virgil Ortiz, and now Conor Ben just destroyed him. We're familiar with Samuel Vargas. We're familiar with guys like Adrian Granados, okay? We're familiar with guys like a Tomas Delorme. He's been in there with a lot of fighters. We're familiar with Jesse Vargas, Adrian Broner, who is a star still has a name, has a lot of star power. We're all familiar with these fighters. Doesn't mean they're technically the best, okay? Doesn't mean that. You know, there are tougher fighters. There are tougher fights out there. You know, and I think when we bring up these fighters and we're always bringing up like guys that would be a good test. Sergey Limpinets was definitely a good test because he was a former champion. He was still fresh. You know what I'm saying? He only had one loss. And he lost to a pound for poundish level fighter at 140. He came up to 147, picked up a couple good wins. He was able to retire Lamont Peterson. You know, he did what he had to do. You know, and that's a good fight. There's no complaints there. I love the fight. I love the Maurice Hooker fight with Virgil Ortiz. You know, I love that fight. I thought that was a great fight. I like Rashidi Ellis's fight against Alexis Rocha. That was a good test for him. I think he's moving a little slowly. You know, he beat Eddie Gomez. That's kind of what got the buzz around him started. You know, beating Eddie Gomez back then. Beating Alexis Rocha was a good win because Rocha was a very he was a pressure fighter. You know, he's throwing bombs, but Ellis was able to outbox him. And these are all good wins. But I don't want to keep having these fighters fight guys that have names. You know, Andre Berto has a name. Andre Berto was a former champion, gave us some classic fights. All right, been in there with some of the best fighters. But right now, Andre Berto has a name. Yes, if a Conor Benn or a Rashidi Ellis or a John Ennis get in there with Andre Berto right now, they're going to say this is his toughest challenge yet, right? But we're basing that strictly off experience and that fighter's name, what they accomplished back in the day when they were in their prime. But right now, Andre Berto would not be a dangerous opponent for a Virgil Ortiz or a Jaron Ennis right now. He just would not be that. I'm not trying to be disrespectful for Berto. I'm just trying to prove a point between him, a Victor Ortiz, a Josecito Lopez, guys that have names that would be a good comeback fight, like a Keith Thurman versus Josecito Lopez. That was a good comeback fight, but it's pretty clear that these guys are really not a threat for these new hungry young fighters. Conor Benn would destroy these guys. Same with Ortiz, same with Boots. They would destroy these guys. And I think if they really want to prove themselves, they should fight some of these other guys that I'm about to name. Cain Velasquez is a more dangerous fight than like an Andre Berto or a Jesse Vargas. You know, I just believe that. I know these guys have names. I know they're champions or former champions. I know they're very accomplished. I know they're very experienced. But they are far past it at this point. Jesse Vargas lost to Mikey Garcia, got dropped, got hurt, when Mikey wasn't even a proven welterweight. You know? Same with Adrian Broner. Adrian Broner got as far as fame, he's good. Is he really a challenge for any of these guys? No, but they'll all be willing to face him because of that name. Cain Velasquez is much more dangerous than these guys. You got Jamal James out there. You got Ugas, who's a champion now, but just not too long ago, before the Sean Porter fight, no one really cared for Ugas like that. You go to Ugas's record, you look at his box record, you look at his losses that he had at 140, and you think he's really not that good when he is really that good. He is very good. You got Butayev that's out there. Butayev is very, very good. All right. He has a no contest now. He lost to Alexander Vesputin, but Vesputin popped dirty. And Butayev, if you've seen that fight, he finished very strong in that fight. That would be a dangerous fight for a Jaron Ennis, for a Conor Benn. You know, these are guys that don't have the name, but they are much more dangerous than the guys that have the names, that are going to get pounded out and it's going to look like a great win on a come up. I'm not saying these fights are bad. I'm just saying, in order for these young fighters to challenge themselves more, these are the names that they should be facing on a come up. Guys that's just like them. Jamal James, Butayev, Kavaliauskas. I saw Stanionis for the first time last night beat Tomas Delorme. Delorme, good fighter. Has some good wins at 140. He was a good top fighter contender at one point. He's been in there with a lot of fighters. Okay? But at the end of the day, he is a good test. He is a good step up. But there are better fighters that are just like these other guys that we keep bringing up. The Bens, the Ellises, the Ortizes, the Ennises. We got other fighters that are just like them. They might not just be as popular yet. Like a Stanionis, a guy that I just seen for the first time. All right? You got Custio Clayton, who, he had a draw with Sergey Limpinets. But before that fight, really didn't see much of him. He's around. All right? He's around. Yelenusenev, I might be saying his name wrong. I just saw him for the first time fighting Julius Ndango. Was able to stop him, make quick work of him. Undefeated Kazakh fighter. All right, Kazakhstan fighter. He's around. He's around. No one really talks about him. All right, we got Florian Marco. He's another fighter on the come up. He's been on all of the zone undercards. Had a fight recently. Didn't look too good. Had a draw. I was actually covering that fight live. I forgot what undercard he was on. Didn't look too good, but he's calling out Conor Benn. He wants to fight Conor Benn. That's a good fight for Conor Benn. All right? We know Samuel Vargas, because of who he's been in there with, he has a name. That's like Eric Molina at heavyweight. Same thing. Eric Molina has a name because he's been in there with Chris Arreola. Deontay Wilder gave him a decent fight, was able to rock Wilder at some point, and then everybody started fighting him. Joshua fought him. Everybody started fighting him. Everyone at heavyweight fought Eric Molina. And he just that guy that everyone is just beating up now and is pounding him out. That's what Samuel Vargas is at this point. He's been in there with these guys. Okay, but when he was in there, what did he do? What did he do? If we're going to be honest, what did he do? The highlight of his career was dropping Amir Khan. That was the highlight of what he's done. He's a good fighter, but when he stepped up, how did he look? So you got guys, these are the fighters that people should be fighting. The Vesputins, the Alexander Vesputin, hopefully he's clean. He's pretty good. But, I think as close to the fight where Butayev was, if he was clean, he probably would have lost. If he was clean, he probably would have lost because he had an advantage and was still a very debatable fight. Hopefully they can either run that back or they could go and move on. But we have other fighters out here in this division. Other fighters that need to be, I think Jamal James, the WBA, I saw an article that the WBA ordered a fight with him and Butayev. That's a good fight. And that's a very dangerous fight for Jamal James. I was trying to think, I know I was on Punch Drunk's live chat and I was talking about, some of the people that I think Ennis could give Ennis some issues, even though I already think he can beat most. I think the Roy Jones comparisons are warranted, for sure. They're warranted. Look at this kid. I've seen some people in the comments that was kind of, talking about his flaws and his defense and stuff like that. And I'm like, we're talking about his defense, but the majority of the time that he's in the ring, he's showboating. His guard is low. He's not fighting cautiously. His reflexes are so sharp that he's able to take risk like that. Like the way he was doing last night when limping, yes, he did get caught with a few big shots. But he's not trying to be Floyd. He's not trying to be Shakur Stevenson. He's not him. He's his own guy. If you look at Roy Jones, that's what Roy Jones did. He doesn't do everything proper. You know? I don't know why people like say that when the fighter is displaying his skills and his talent. He's not feeling like he's in any danger. I think when he steps up, there could be a point where he has to take a different approach. Lomachenko was doing the exact same thing. Like for people that are being critical of Boots' defense, right? Yeah, he's a little wild sometimes. Yes, he leaves himself open at times. Cool. But Lomachenko was doing the same thing. He's dropping his guard. He was leaning his face forward towards his opponent, you know, slipping the shots. Look at the Nicholas Walter fight. Look at that fight. He didn't feel threatened. He know Walters had the power, but Walters couldn't hit him. But guess what? When Lomachenko stepped up in weight, got a little harder. All right? Fort Mariaga started getting hit a little bit more often than we usually see him. Then when he went to 135, he couldn't do the same thing. Couldn't take the same approach. He had to fight differently. He was fighting better fighters at 135, bigger fighters with bigger punches. But he was in the lower divisions, the guard, he was dropping his guard. He was just slipping shots, using his head movement for his defense and his legs. He was relying on his reflexes for defense. All right? I do believe that Jaron Ennis, a guy that's fighting on that level, can tighten up his guard for sure. But he didn't feel like he was in danger. Virgil Ortiz was doing the same thing with Samuel Vargas in his last fight before the Hooker fight. He was doing the exact same thing. He was standing in front of Samuel Vargas, toying with him, stepping around him. All right? He was showing his reflexes. But when he stepped in there with Maurice Hooker, we saw the guard go up. We saw him getting hit a lot more than we're used to seeing him get hit. They all do it. Josh Kelly, look at all his highlights in his first pro fights, in his amateur fights. Toying around, showing his reflexes. But when he stepped up fighting the Ray Vargases of the world and the David Avanesians of the world, you know, another guy that's, I don't know if I mentioned David Avanesian earlier, but that's another fighter that is probably, don't have the name, but it's probably a better challenge for some of these newer up-and-coming guys out there. Better challenges, don't have the names, but they are better challenges. David Avanesia is up there. But Josh Kelly, look at him. You know, he looked flawless. When he's dropping his guard and showboating, then he stepped up in opposition and he was actually getting hit and he was getting hurt. So I was impressed with Jaron Ennis because he stepped up, and as he stepped up, he improved. You know, I know the Keith Van Herden fight didn't end well, but it was a good performance for the amount of time that we saw it. He was clearly about to get Herden out of there a lot earlier than Errol Spence did. That's cool. But when you fight a guy that is fresh, that is seasoned, that was a former champion in Sergey Limpinets, and you destroy him like that, it's very impressive. Virgil Ortiz did the same thing with Maurice Hooker. Very impressive. Right? We all assumed that Ennis was going to win, that Virgil Ortiz was going to win. But when you actually do it and you look impressive as you step up, you do get credit for it, because even if we all expected it to happen, most of us expected him to stop Lipinets in that fight at some point. I expected it to be a little later. All right, so he did even better than what I thought. But you got to give him credit because he could have always win it. He could have went in there and looked like Josh Kelly against Ray Robinson, or Josh Kelly against David Avanesian. He could have stepped up and got knocked out. You never know. What if one of those big right hands that Lipinets landed in the fight actually dropped Boots Ennis? Then we all would have been saying he's overrated. But he took the shots and he ate them. He took them. They were clean, and he ate the shots. You know? He put himself in danger to entertain us, to show us what he can do. I was very impressed. All right. For the current welterweights, for the Spences, the guys that are left, Keith Thurman, Spence, Crawford, Porter, Ugas, Pacquiao, get it together. All right, get it together. We know that Pacquiao is like basically 1 foot out the door. He's pretty much entertaining wherever the money is at. The most money, he's going that way. That's what I feel. Last thing we heard, it would be Crawford. I made a video about that last week. But for the other guys that I just named, get it together. Get it together before one of these hungry guys, before one of these sanctioning bodies will order you to fight one of them, and they get you out of here. All right, Teofimo Lopez didn't destroy Lomachenko, but he just won when most people didn't think he could do it. Most people didn't think he could do it. So for Crawford or for Spence or for Thurman or for whoever else says, don't be the next Lomachenko, or be the next Lomachenko and let the other young guy beat you. But before you go that route, at the very least, give us the fights that we've been waiting for. At least give us that. For the boxing fans that supported you all of these years, don't go out doing, how we didn't get Riddick Bowe and Lennox Lewis, or someone brought up yesterday like Sugar Ray Leonard and Aaron Pryor. We don't want to get that. Let's get those fights going while you're still fresh and still around at top shape. Let's not get it where you're too old and you already lost to someone and the fight doesn't mean as much. Like Wilder and Joshua. Let's get it now. All right? So hopefully these guys get it together. Hopefully we can make some of these matches so we could get some of these younger guys to get their opportunity. But in the meantime, I do want to see some of these younger guys fight each other as well. That's what we're not getting at 135. Hopefully we get some of them at 135 by next year. I mean, everything is seeming to go as predicted by me at 135. I expected some of the younger undefeated fighters to fight some of the old time guys going, on the way out, like a Luke Campbell and Jorge Linares and, all of these guys that were top guys at 135 at one point. But at 147, let's at least get those top fighters to get in the ring with each other before these young up-and-coming guys, these hungry fighters, get them out of there. Conor Ben, he's not even calling out Rashidi Ellis or Virgil Ortiz or Jaron Ennis. He's not calling out any of those guys. All right? He's calling out Amir Khan, Kell Brook, Sean Porter. He's calling out those kind of guys. Same thing with Jaron Ennis. He's calling out Bud right now. Virgil Ortiz calling out Bud right now. Because these guys are not getting the fights that we want. And these young, hungry fighters, they want to take your spot. You might not even make it to Spence. And I'm not saying that these young fighters are going to beat the older fighters, but they're not. Listen, if they're not already there at their level, they're pretty damn close. All right? They asked me last night on the Punch Drunk if, how I feel about Ennis and what in the comparisons to Bud. And his comments saying he could do everything Bud can do, but he can do it better. Well, he's yet to really prove that. He might be right, but he could be wrong. I think the one thing and the point that I made is that the one thing with Bud is that I seen Bud down on points and he make adjustments. I seen him struggle against Delorme early a little bit, against Gamboa. You know, I seen him struggle a little bit early. I seen him figure it out and beat the hell out of his opponent right after. I haven't seen Ennis do that yet. I don't know if Ennis is capable to really adjusting to all of his opponents. He only really fought one high level welterweight so far. So I really don't know what he can do until I see him fight some of these other guys I just named. Again, it's not just Conor Benn and Rashidi Ellis. You know, we got the Kavalaskis, Butayev, Jamal James, Yelanusenev, Florian Marco, Alexander Besputin. You know, all of those guys are other good fighters too. That's on the come up. Most of them are undefeated as well. All right. So I want to see a little bit more, and we will see. You know, Ennis is moving in the right direction. So is Virgil Ortiz and all these young, hungry fighters. They all look good. And I think some of them are going to be champions at some point. You know, at some point, Ennis versus Ortiz or Conor Benn or Rashidi Ellis or one of these other guys, some of them could possibly be pay-per-views, future pay-per-views. You know, and I'm looking forward to seeing all of those guys. All I want at welterweight is for the older guys to get it together and get in the ring and do what they got to do. And make room before we making room for these younger guys, all right? All right, so that's pretty much it. You know, again, make sure you subscribe, hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, hit that bell notification. And I'll see you guys in the next one. All right, peace.